Chapter 1. This is us, my family. I am dyslexic. I am the daughter of a dyslexic, the mother of several dyslexic children, and the wife of a dyslexic. As a child, I attended a private school. The school administration told my parents I had a reading disability. 30 years later, I realized my reading disability was moderate dyslexia. Despite attending a small private school and having private tutors through elementary school, I still couldn't read by the end of 3rd grade, so they held me back. To this day, I remember the horrific embarrassment I felt as my classmates moved on to 4th grade, while I moved across the hall to the mean 3rd grade teacher's class. That was the year I began to get in all trouble in school. Coincidence? I think not. That year, I became the principal's personal assistant because I spent an exorbitant amount of time in the principal's office. It was my 2nd time in 3rd grade, and although my behavior went south, at least I learned how to read. Every day I was pulled out of class and walked across the street for my private tutoring sessions. I don't remember much about my tutoring experience, other than my tutor was kind and patient. I don't know for certain, but perhaps I received Orton Gillingham instruction that year. I am not sure, but whatever the instruction was, it made the difference and I learned how to read. I always had a good grasp of math and continued to advance in math the year I repeated the 3rd grade. The following year, I went to a different private school, and since I could now read and continued to be strong in math, I was placed back into the right grade. So I skipped 4th grade and never learned about dinosaurs. The adjustment to go directly into 5th grade was minimal. Since reading was no longer such a hard hurdle, I embarked on a more level playing field when it came to working with my peers. Fast forward several years to high school. During my sophomore year, while taking a fashion design class, my interests in fashion design blossomed. I took a sewing class on Saturdays at Fashion Institute of Technology, our local fashion design college. I was so engaged and energized that by my senior year, I applied to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, a fashion design college in California, and was accepted. After graduation, I packed my bags and headed out to California. In no time, I was hired as a part-time assistant sales representative for a junior sportswear company in a showroom in downtown LA. Within a few months, I was promoted to a full-time position at their factory as an assistant designer. I stayed in the fashion industry until I left for maternity leave for my first child a few years later. Dyslexia is heredity. My first child, Chris, was amazingly easy, well-behaved, curious, and academically advanced. He was one of those kids who you hear stories about and wonder if you should believe the storyteller. My son taught himself how to read in kindergarten. By 1st grade, he was reading well above his peers. In 2nd grade, he was reading on an 8th grade reading level and was placed in a mixed 2nd, 3rd grade class and spent his day with the high-achieving 3rd graders. He was pulled out of class twice a week for the Gifted and Talented Enrichment Program, GATE, and was even tested to see if he would score high enough to attend a special program for highly gifted students. He ended up scoring just a few points shy of the IQ score they were looking for, and so he wasn't placed in that program. In summary, having a highly academically gifted child was no preparation for our next child. My 2nd child, Olivia, was the opposite, starting at birth. She was active, high maintenance, and had difficulty with basic fine motor skills as a preschooler. When she was 3, I owned and operated a preschool and knew the expectation of a typical preschooler's capabilities. I noticed that she could not perform some basic tasks. Olivia didn't draw pictures, not even stick figures, or have the ability to cut with scissors. At that point, I began to wonder what the underlying reasons was for this deficit, but I couldn't find any answers. These were pre-internet times. When Olivia entered kindergarten, it became more noticeable that she was struggling with spelling and reading. She left vowels out of every word, even common words like dog or cat, and she wasn't learning to read alongside her classmates. In kindergarten, her teacher wrote on one of her papers she turned in, "You can do better than that." She couldn't read the message, so I took it as a message directed towards me. Looking back now, I am relieved she couldn't read it, because that would have crushed her self-esteem in kindergarten. Very often, teachers think dyslexic students are not reading on grade level because parents aren't putting in the effort. Not true. Not knowing what we were dealing with or what would help, I hired teachers to tutor her after school for her in first, second, and third grade, to no avail. By now it had become my mommy mission to find answers. I spent the next 9 years trying to pinpoint the problem. Teachers weren't any help. In first grade, I observed her cheating off another student's test. Her teacher didn't notice. That year, the school recommended we hold her back. Even though I was not totally on board with that, I reluctantly agreed because I thought they knew what was best. If I could turn back time, I would not have agreed to holding her back. In the next school year, my husband and I sent both our school-aged children to a private school. We struggled to find a school that would accept both kids, with one being academically advanced and the other one a few years behind. We were optimistic that going to a private school with smaller classes would help. It didn't. In retrospect, I realize it wasn't necessarily the best decision because the private school didn't have any resources available for my child with unidentified difficulties. In a recent conversation, I learned my daughter's teacher belittled her and verbally abused her the entire year she was at that school. The following year, both my kids went back to public school. That year, my daughter's third grade teacher responded to my concerns by saying, "Other kids are worse than her." Today, I realize the teacher was referring to her hyperactivity and not her reading and spelling struggles. This child of mine was gifted with charm and pizzazz, two strengths I attribute to her dyslexia. Those gifts carried her through her academic career because all of her teachers, except the second grade teacher, loved her. That is one of the reasons she made it so far without someone identifying her as having a serious reading and spelling problem that needed to be addressed. In 2004, we moved to Texas. Our daughter was in fourth grade and her teacher identified she was dyslexic after only 1 week in class. Just 1 week. Because unlike teachers in other states, most Texas school districts are very educated about dyslexia. She had to wait until the following school year to be tested and then began receiving Orton-Gillingham services. We finally had answers, and that changed our lives. My third child, Jacob, was as easy as they come. He took 2 naps a day for 3 hours, was an agreeable child, and seemed to be an average learner. No major academic challenges to speak of. Average IQ. Just an average student, or so we thought. We were so excited that he got into a coveted dual language program in first grade that our school district offered. Native English-speaking students were only accepted by a lottery system, or if they had a sibling already in the program. Our excitement was short-lived as we discovered he was struggling to learn Spanish. He couldn't grasp a second language and began falling behind in other areas as well. We reluctantly moved him back into an English-only classroom the following year. Years later, it became evident that his struggle to learn a second language was associated with his mild dyslexia and profound writing anxiety caused by dysgraphia. Our fourth child, Sammy, was born 16 months short after Jacob. He was a handful from the start. He didn't like to sleep. He cried for hours nonstop. He did not like to be in loud or crowded places. I couldn't leave him at a church nursery where we frequented 3 to 4 days a week for various activities. He didn't speak until he was 2. He communicated with us through a series of grunts and didn't speak to us until I forced everyone to stop giving him what he wanted unless he asked for it. At age 3, he started speech therapy. At age 4, he attended the local public school's preschool. At the time, I was unaware that such was their early intervention program. It wasn't until years later that I realized all of these challenges Sammy experienced were related to his neurodiversities: sensory processing disorder, auditory processing delay, and vision processing disorder. Sammy started speech therapy in preschool, and since he missed the cutoff to start kindergarten in Texas, I was very relieved because I thought it would give him the time he needed to be ahead of the game. He started school shy of his 6th birthday. Kindergarten wasn't very eventful. The next year was quite different. I attended several parent-teacher conferences to discuss how much he was struggling in 1st grade. His desk was moved right next to the teacher's in order to help him focus and be successful. This helped him stay more focused, and he showed some progress. But alas, at the end of the year, his teacher called me in for our final parent-teacher conference for 1st grade and suggested we conduct some tests to see what was going on. By this time, I was becoming very familiar with the signs of dyslexia, and I requested they test him for it. They obliged me and tested him 1 year earlier than they normally do, the dyslexia testing. He was the last student in the school district to be tested that year, and within 1 week before the end of the school year, we had our diagnosis. I know what you are thinking. Test? Do they really do testing for dyslexia in school? Well, yes, but only in a few states, Texas being the most aggressive at the time I am writing this. After the passage of a couple of years and lots of advocacy, 2 of my struggling children were now diagnosed with dyslexia and receiving appropriate Orton-Gillingham-based remediation in school. My daughter completed her program before we left Texas. My youngest son, however, did not, and his dyslexia teacher told me I needed to learn how to continue to teach him using an Orton-Gillingham method. I was okay with that. I was going to be homeschooling our youngest 2 children the following year anyway, so if it would help him be successful, I was ready to take on the challenge. Teaching is one of my God-given gifts, so I was up for the challenge. Today, my youngest son, Sammy, is a freshman in high school and reads on a 9th to 10th grade level. More importantly, he enjoys reading. He is taking pre-algebra and is learning how to write high school level papers. I would say that is success. Update. It took me several years to complete my book and has since graduated from high school. I am happy to share that in 10th grade, he was reading on an 11th grade reading level, and this summer between 10th and 11th grade, Sammy went from writing a 4-sentence paragraph to writing 2-page papers. Today, he is an avid reader and striving to become a graphic novelist. After a few years of tutoring my son, my daughter, and a few other students, I noticed signs in my husband that made me realize he, too, is dyslexic. His story is an all too common story of so many undiagnosed dyslexics. Obviously, I wasn't around when he was a child in school, but I know his story well because I have heard his story over and over again from so many struggling students. My husband told me he realized in about fourth grade that he was not grasping the information being taught. He went to school and did his best to hide that he was struggling. He didn't turn to his parents or teachers for help. He just felt like he was dumb because he could not grasp the information being taught. He often asked his older sister for help on homework he didn't understand. As time passed, he began to use humor as a cover for his struggles. He fell further and further behind in school, and by the time he got to high school, he hardly showed up anymore. Too many undiagnosed dyslexics are ashamed and don't want people to know that they are struggling. Dyslexic people are usually very bright, so they can often figure out ways to hide their deficits. Instead of asking for help or drawing attention to their struggles, many dyslexic people will shift the attention from the struggles to acting silly or will misbehave, disrupt the class, make a scene, start fights, etc. I had a kindergarten student who learned to act goofy to cover up. Sadly, too often, undiagnosed dyslexic students are labeled stupid, lazy, dumb, a goofball, etc. Teachers will often say, "He isn't trying hard enough. If she would only apply herself. He's smart, but lazy." I have heard too many stories of the teachers telling parents of our students it is the parents' fault that their child is not doing well in school. Teachers guilt the parents by saying, "You need to read more to your child at night. You're not doing enough." Only 68% of students with learning disabilities leave high school with a regular diploma, while 19% drop out and 12% receive a certificate of completion. Unfortunately, most teachers are not educated enough regarding the signs of dyslexia. Instead, they incorrectly label their students. It is my desire to travel around the United States educating parents and teachers about the 3 Ds: dyslexia, dyscalculia, and dysgraphia. My mission is for fewer people with dyslexia, dyscalculia, or dysgraphia to fall through the cracks so they can receive help sooner than later. Now that we have the ability to teach lessons online, we can help more children and adults experience success all over the United States. People think diagnosing or determining dyslexia is a new thing. However, it isn't new. My mom was diagnosed with dyslexia over 70 years ago. She was one of the preliminary subjects studied at Yale in the 1940s. As a young child, my mom remembers her head being strapped to a machine to read her brain scans. After receiving a dyslexia diagnosis, my mom was sent to a school over 100 miles from her home to get appropriate help. Because it was too far of a commute for her family to make every day, they decided to have her live at a boarding school near the school Sunday through Thursday at the young age of 11 and 12. My mom had an advantage that most Americans don't receive today, let alone in 1948. Because her father was a Yale alumnus and her parents were able to afford to provide her the best possible chance of success, she got lots of help. After completing high school, my mom attended Sarah Lawrence, a college that today is a college recommended for dyslexic students. The better you understand dyslexia, the better off your child's future will be. A few unexpected successes occurred after learning how to help my child were: 1. Being able to identify dyslexia in others. 2. Helping other learners who struggled with reading, writing, spelling, and math successfully read, write, or type better, improve their spelling, and understand math concepts and processes. 3. Educating people about the 3Ds would become my mission in life. 4. Helping bridge the gaps for students as early as possible and improving their academic abilities through tutoring.